Hello and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Of course, it might be morning where you are if you're over in the States, so thanks for getting up and joining us this morning. Hopefully you've got yourselves a coffee or a drink. We're going to spend probably 20-25 minutes. We're going to go through MConfig, just an introduction to MConfig, how to get started with the program. We're going to go through and we're going to use the example of an 818 or 808. And we're going to hook that up to a pair of speakers in this system. So what we're going to do is we'll get started right away. So we'll dive into the program now. Now, Des is in the room with us. He is going to share with you a link to where you can get the MConfig program from. Des is also going to point out if I forget to tell you anything as we go. So if you've got any questions, fire them through Des, through the chat room. If it's stuff we can answer as we go, we will do. If not, at the end, we're going to hang around for 10-15 minutes and answer any of your questions in the chat room afterwards. So anyway, enough said, let's make a start on getting things configured. So I'm going to stick my screen up for you to all see. And right, let's get started. So the first thing you'll notice is that we have got a welcome screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with clicking next. So top left hand corner, we can see the next button. We're going to click on that and that's going to take us through to the next page. Now what's going to come up here is your workspace. So we've got a tab on the left hand side and it's kind of a bit like a history lesson of Meridian. So we've got all of the Meridian products that you can configure using the MConfig program. So down the left-hand side, you can see we've got anything ranging from some of the 800 series right through to the UHD 722 and the Ultra DAC. Now, for example, today we are going to use an 818 V3. Now, the 818 is very similar to the 808 CD player. Both can be used as a preamp. The main difference really is going to be that the CD player has got a CD drive built into it, but you can still use all the preamp functionality within it. Now, it's very important when we're setting up a product or setting up a system that we actually use the correct products that we're going to put into the system. So it's an 818 V3 that I've got on my desk. So we're going to drag that across into the workspace and get started. So the first thing that you'll see will happen is that we've now got a line appears on the screen. On the right-hand side, we've got two square boxes, and these are going to be where we place our speakers. The space on the left-hand side is kind of like our rack space. This is where we're going to put all of our equipment and organize it all. So we can move stuff about on this screen by just left-clicking and dragging it around. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a source to this. So we're actually going to add three sources to this, and we'll go through them. So the first source we're going to add is we're going to add a CD player, but we're not going to add a Meridian CD player. Now you'll notice since we've dragged this over, and started with the 818, we've now got a couple more tabs that have appeared on this left-hand side. The one that we're going to click on is sources. If I click on that, it now brings up a list of all the sources that we could add to this. Again, a bit of a history lesson of Meridian. We've got all of the old stuff on there. We've got some of the new stuff that we make as well. But this means that you can use this program to configure lots of the old products as well. So because it's a non-Meridian CD player that we're going to add to this system, we actually need to add a source which is called other. So there are multiple ways of using this software. Now, there's the way that I like to use it. You'll probably find as you use the software more, there's ways that you'll like to use it as well. So the way I like to do things is I like to just grab a hold of this from the left-hand side and drag it into our workspace. So once we drag it into the workspace, we can see that a pop-up box appears and it's saying insert source. Now we have got some built-in templates within MConfig. So the first one that we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we can see that there's a template that's been created for CD player. The next box down you'll see it says MSR plus key. Now the way that Meridian systems always work is that we've got 12 logical sources and various different inputs on the product. So it might mean that we've got 12 logical sources on a product, but we haven't got 12 inputs. And what it means is we can map the sources to different inputs. Now the key that we're going to bring up to use for CD is the one on the MSR, which is labeled CD. And you can see from this drop down box, these are all the options that you can choose from. So obviously we're going to stick with CD. The legend, so this is the thing that's going to appear on the front of the product, and on a display speaker if you've got one, the legend is going to be CD. We'll just double check that we've got the kind of outputs that we want from our CD player. Now the mythical CD player that we're going to add into this system has got a digital coax out, and I can see that it's got one of those. So if we hit OK, it's going to create that source for us now. Right, so now that we've got that source, we can drag that around and reorganize it wherever we like. It doesn't affect how the system's going to be programmed. It's just for your own layout and seeing how you like to have stuff arranged. So from the CD player, to hook it up to the 818V3, we are going to drag a connection from the CD player, from the digital connection across to D1, which is the input on the 818V3 that we're going to connect this to. Now I'm showing you how to do this by adding a source first. You can, if you want, add speakers first. That's not a problem, but personally I always prefer to work left to right. And you'll notice on the products that we've actually got the outputs on the CD player on the right hand side of it, and the inputs are on the left hand side of the 818. And you can see over on the right hand side here, this is where the outputs are on the 818. Now once we've got that one added, we're going to add a second source. Now the second source we're going to add to this is a TV. So again, Meridian don't make TVs, so we're going to use an other source. Drag the other source across into the workspace area. Now instead of using a template, we're going to make our own this time. So the key that we're going to go for, the MSR plus key that's going to trigger this input, is going to be key 7, which is TV. We're going to change the legend. So this is what's going to be displayed on the products. We're going to change that to TV as well. And then we're going to have a look down our list of outputs that we've got that are possible on the product. Now if I scroll down here, we can see that we have got pretty much every audio-visual connection imaginable, including some ones that you'll probably never ever use. So we'll go back up to the top and we can see that we have got optical. So we're going to add one optical connection coming out of our TV. Now most TVs have got optical out. There are others, of course, which have got digicoax, some have analog out, but we're going to go with optical because that's what most of the TVs in the marketplace have. Going to hit OK, and that's going to create my next source. So I'm going to drag that down and I'm going to connect that up. So what I do is I drag across from the optical into optical 1 on this product. Now there's something to bear in mind, is that on Meridian products such as the 861, it has multiple cards, and the cards, each individual card is labeled, and you may find that you have multiple O1s on the back of a product. So it's always worth checking that you've got the connection made into the correct card as you go. Finally, what we're going to do is we're going to add a record connection to this. So one of the things that we have got on the 818 is a set of analog connections. So in fact, let me just, so yeah, analog inputs on 818s and 808s. So all of our analog to digital converters on our products are 2496. So they're transparent conversion of your analog to digital audio. In fact, what I'm going to do is, Des, can you run a poll and just see, what we're going to do is we're going to see how you guys tend to use the 818 and 808. So is this a product that you use with analog speakers, so you're using it with a power amp and passive speakers, or is it something that you tend to use exclusively with Meridian DSP speakers? So hopefully there's a poll up on the screen now.
It's just going up now. There you go.
Okay, cool. So be interesting to get you guys take on how you actually use these products with systems, because of course you can use it for both. We've got very high quality analog outputs on the 818 and 808, so you can use those alongside the speaker link outputs to Meridian speakers. So anyway, what we'll do is we'll now configure the 818 so that we've got the ability to put an analog source into it. And we're going to use the example of a record player, a record deck, because in the modern world, that is pretty much one of the last true analog sources that we've got. Everything else pretty much comes into our homes in a digital format. So I'll show you how to do that now. So back to the screen. And I will share this with you. And there we go. Right, so one of the things to note about the 818 is that it doesn't have it's line level inputs into the 818. It's not a phono level input. So this means you're going to have to use a record deck with a phono stage of your choice. So I'll show you now how to add an analog connection into the 818. Again, unsurprisingly, we're going to go back down to the bottom and we're going to add an other source. We're going to pick an MSR key that is going to select this source. Now, looking down the list, we haven't got one that is labeled phono or record. So I'm going to go with disc because to me, that's the closest thing to a record. A record, after all, is a disc of sorts. And then legend. So we are going to type in here, hang on, sorry, no, we're not connecting a phono to this. We're going to connect a phono. So we have got 5 characters that we can choose from when we're putting legends on Meridian products. The reason for that is that our display type speakers have got a display which can only display up to 5 characters. So that's just a limitation of the system. Now, the other thing to note as well is that when we go to set analog outputs, we only need to add one analog output. Now, what we're doing is we're adding one analog pair. We don't have to add a left and a right connection on this. The program assumes that you're going to use a stereo connection. So we'll hit OK, and it's going to create our phono connection. And we can see that it's saying that disk is going to be the key that is going to trigger this input to work. Now, to connect it up, unsurprisingly, we drag across and we drop it on to the 818 V3, and that's us with our connection onto it. The last thing that we're going to do now is we're going to add some speakers. So we're going to assume for the purpose of this exercise that you've sold to the client a pair of DSP-7200s.
And if I could just add there, that's what, according to our poll, 60% or thereabouts are DSP speakers, around 40% with passives and power amps.
Okay, interesting. So hooking up speakers is equally easy whether you're going to use it with the analog outputs into passive speakers or the digital active speakers. What I'm going to show you today is how to hook up a pair of DSP-7200s. We're going to assume for the purpose of this exercise that it's a pair of DSP-7200 SEs that you've sold to the client. Now, on the speakers tab, we can see looking down here that we haven't actually got a speaker that says DSP-7200 SE. Now, the truth of the matter is the program and the 818 don't actually really care whether it's a DSP-7200, the original version, a DSP-7200.2, or a DSP-7200 SE. It's still going to send the same digital audio to those speakers, and it's still going to send the same control signals. The extra performance that you're going to get is actually down to the electronics that are in the speaker itself. So all we have to do, yet again, we'll just drag and drop. So we'll drag across into our workspace, in fact, into our room, and the speakers appear and they've got the connection going in there already. So you'll notice that we've got a little red dot on the left-hand speaker. The reason for this is that this is the master speaker. Now, Meridian systems work on a basis of one master speaker and multiple slave speakers. So we always have to have In a Meridian system, we always have one master speaker and we have multiple slave speakers. In a stereo system, obviously, it's going to be one slave. And one top tip that I've got for you is that when we ship our speakers from the factory, we set them up for you. So the last thing that happens is they get tested before they get packed, and they get set up so that the left master speaker will have serial number which ends in an A, and the right slave speaker will have a serial number which ends in a B. Now, this applies to all of our display speakers. When it comes to non-display speakers, these are a lot easier because you don't have to do any setup of them. Whichever one is plugged into the master socket will assume the role of being the master. So this is just a tip for when you're getting our DSP display type speakers delivered to site. So back to the program. With a bit of clicking. So we've got the speakers connected up. The next thing that we need to do is we need to store this configuration that we've made. Now, it's always a really good idea, as with any control system or anything that you're configuring, is to make a copy of the configuration that you've made. So what we're going to do is we're going to store this before, we're going to save this before we store the configuration to the product. So I'm going to hit save. My own way of naming stuff, I like to put what the day's date is into the file name. Now this will probably be backwards for Americans, but it makes sense to us Brits. So I'm going to save it as that. I'm going to save it on my desktop, which isn't where I'd normally save stuff, but it's easy for the purpose of this. Now we've got that saved, it means that we can, if we have a phone call from a client saying, hey, I've got problems with my system, I don't know how things are configured, we can call up the program and we've got a record of how it's been set up. To store this configuration to the product, we have got a couple of little boxes up at the top. The one that I'm hovering over at the moment that says fetch, that will fetch the configuration back from the product. The one to the right is, so it's a little box with an arrow pointing into it, is the store. Now, one of the things that you need to have to work with Meridian products is a USB to serial adapter. Now, when I first started out in the custom install industry, I had a laptop which had a had a serial port actually built into the laptop. Now, as our laptops got thinner and lighter, those kind of features aren't built in anymore, so you need to use a USB to serial adapter. Now, Des is going to share with you the model name and number of a USB serial adapter which we recommend. It's the Triplight or Keyspan USA 19HS. Now, this USB to serial adapter we found to be very, very reliable. If you are having any issues with not connecting, then it might be worth getting one of these more expensive serial adapters. They cost probably what, 25, 30 bucks, or about 25 pounds UK, and definitely well worth getting a hold of. So to store to the product, we're just going to hit the store button. And now I'm just going to show you, sometimes you'll need to choose which COM port you're going to actually send this from. Now, COM1 is usually the internal port on your computer. I'll show you what happens if we try to store with the wrong COM port selected. So hit start. You can see immediately that it's come up and said it can't establish connection with a product on COM1. At this point, don't panic. Click on the options button. If we now go to port and select one of the other ports, now I know that it's actually COM4 that is my USB to serial adapter. Hit OK, hit start, and now we can see that it's actually connected to the 818v3. Now, one of the things that you might notice when it goes through this is it's saying reading, it says reading user type, writing user type. Now, one of the concepts that we have within Meridian systems is types. Types are factory defaults. So in Meridian DSP display type speakers, we have two types that we tend to use. So we'll have type 1 is for a stereo system. Type 6 is for a surround sound system. with the 818 and 808, we have got two types built into those. One is fixed analog output level, and the second is variable analog output level. And what we've created just now is a user type. So the user type is our own default that we've loaded into the product. Now, the other two factory defaults, the type 1 and the type 2, they already exist in the product. And a word of warning, if you are going to hook the 818 up to a passive system, make sure, absolutely make sure before you turn any power amps on that the product is set to variable. Because if you don't, you're going to be sending line level output from it into your amplifier, and chances are you're going to be firing tweeters across the room. So we've got the configuration stored to the product now. So that is really, all we need to do with this system. You can see it's really actually very straightforward to just get in and configure an 818 or an 808 so it's easy to use for your customer. So for example, now you won't be able to see this on the screen, unfortunately, but if I go to source on the 818, because we've set it up with 3 sources connected to it, so I press the source button, it toggles through the 3 sources that we've actually added to this product. So it makes it a lot easier for your client to use. It makes it a customized product. It means that you've got a copy of the configuration. Now, of course, when we get into using MConfig for a surround sound system, it gets a little bit more involved because we're going to start adding more and more speakers to the system. As we add more speakers, there's more complexity because also we're able to do room correction and calibrations, etc. But that's kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing today. Today really is about just getting in, having a play around with the program. And that's another key thing as well, is that you can use this program without the products attached. So you can download this, you can have a play around with it, you can make some crazy systems in there and do what you like with it. Alternatively, another good thing to do is before you're going to site, you can actually create a configuration so that it's really easy when you get to site just to blast that into the products when you get there. So anyway, I hope you found that useful. Thanks for taking time out this morning if you're in America, this afternoon if you're in the UK, and whatever time of day it might be wherever else you are in the world. So thanks for joining us. Thanks from me and Des. We're going to hang around for 10-15 minutes in the chat room. So if you've got any questions, I've seen Des typing away in the corner. So there's probably 1 or 2 things that you might want to know about. Stick with us. We will in the future be doing more webinars about using MConfig and some of the more advanced stuff. But what we want to do is just get you a place where you could jump off from to get used to how the program works. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.